Welcome to the Mischief. I'm Vallen, and this is the Path of Fire Elite Specialization, the Scourge. I'm going to be covering the new weapon, the new Shroud, and Shades, punishments, Elite, and a little bit of the build. As you can see here, I am currently in a PvP area so that we can take advantage of somewhat of a structure for the items that are going to be used in this. I will first be covering the new weapon, which is the torch that the Scourge, previously called the Necromancer, as a Scourge is an elite specialization. The torch is a new offhand weapon. It's not your forehand, so you only get 2 extra abilities. And then I'm going to be going into the new Shades and Shrouds as well, which you do change out your previous Shroud ability, which is now being able to turn on a Desert Shroud instead of your more necrotic-natured one. And you will, therefore, as seen here, turn into a bit of a different person with a barrier system, which the Necromancer now carries a lot of possibilities for using the barriers. But before we get too far into that, you should know that with this new Elite Specialization, you do get a new ability to create shades, which they are very similar to the Guild Wars 1 spirits that you can summon. They will stay there for a time and grant some kind of bonus or cast an effect, but they're a little bit different from the Guild Wars 1, just kind of similar in that, so just so that you're aware of it. But let's go over the torch. To start with, we've got Harrowing Wave, where you can unleash a wave of corrupted fire, burning and tormenting enemies. Gain life force for each enemy struck. Of course, life force is something that is gained in here, and will help you to cast your Shroud ability, as well as some of the abilities that your Shades can also use. So with the first skill, Harrowing Wave, you would think that with a range of 600 and no defining characteristic of what it might actually cover, that it might actually go out in a radius, but it does not actually state radius. It actually does go out in kind of a cone pattern from your character towards targets in front of you. So in this case, if I cast this, you'll see it does kind of like a 90-degree arc in front of you. It's pretty decent distance there. It does grant burning effect as well as torment. Also, of course, gains you that life force, which you're going to be needing in order to do a lot of your shrouding abilities. And it has a decent range of 600, so you know that you can use it with a scepter and or switch it up with a melee weapon if you so desire. It does have a wide enough arc that you can catch it with melee weapons a lot easier than if you were to, have like a really tiny cone shape. Now, the other one here, Oppressive Collapse. This one's a bit more interesting. It's got a radius on it, so it is going to be a circle around your character. You corrupt the ground under your target. If they remain within the area, they will be knocked down. Grant might to allies near your target based on how many conditions they have. So it also will affect them with torment. So it's got 3 things going on with this skill. It does recharge 25 seconds, so it's not like spammable or anything, but the reason that I mentioned that it's got 3 different things is that 1, it will do a knockdown if they stay in the area, but if they try and escape the area, then they're taking extra damage from the torment. So it's kind of a catch-22. You're screwed if you do and you're screwed if you don't. But I really do like that, plus the fact that just about all of the necromancy skills in this new set will grant some kind of benefit to your allies, quite possibly yourself as well, as a nice side effect. In this case, you've got your per condition of 60 power and 60 condition damage in this case, and it's just really nice to have those extra bonuses. But it's grant might to allies near your target based on how many conditions they have, which of course, necromancers by default are meant to bestow a lot of conditions. In this case, I have a scepter equipped, which gives bleeding, poison, cripple, torment, and then of course the 2 new skills which also grant burning, torment. You can just stack on tons of your different conditions in this case. So you're able to gain a lot of effects out of it. Now let me use this one here. Radius of 240. And there we go. It is affecting the area that the target is and the 240 range from him. And as you can see, it does like the torment and so on there. I've got the stats just scrolling on the side here for any reference. And for those that are interested in the current build that I have set up right now, It's nothing really fantastic. I just have like a on-hit remove a condition, remove movement and parrying effects for myself on all my weapons right now, just so that there's nothing really skewing too much. Plus, I just have some divinity runes on here for just basic stats, and I've got a barbarian amulet on here so that I can buff my vitality. Now, the reason that I'm stating this is because your vitality is going to actually play a different part in your life force gain for this effect. Your life force costs for your shade abilities, which is what I'm going to be covering next, is actually affected somewhat by your health. Now, it might benefit you to run a high life force gaining build, and therefore you don't really need that extra health buff. But if you have a higher health pool, you'll have a higher life force pool. So for example, let's go with, I currently have a barbarian amulet. Let's go with the berserker one, which has no vitality. So if I choose this, you'll see that my life force pool is currently just shy of 14,000. So if I go back with the barbarian amulet, which is maximum vitality, you'll see that I have lost that. Now, there were a couple enemies that just died nearby, and I gained a bunch of life force. But there was, that 13,000 before, or close to 14,000. Therefore, it just reduces your maximum pool that you'll have to work with, which can be interesting, especially since the life force costs are not reduced by your level, or your different stats in that case. Perhaps on your build it will be influenced with your cost, but currently it is something that you might want to take into effect or into consideration. Is a higher health pool will just give you a higher life force pool to work with as well if you are constantly spamming your different shade abilities. So let's talk a little bit about shades. By getting your Scourge ability, you can wield torches, and of course you gain the power to craft sand shadows and command them using your life force, gaining access to punishment and shade skills. So let's look at those. Your shade now, you can manifest a sand shade, and by doing so, using some of your life force, whenever you use a shade ability, you and your sand shade strike nearby enemies. So you're placing down a stable target, a being that has no health. So if I place this down, he's going to affect this medium golem here, and he appears in that area. You can actually have up to 3 out at a time. I'm going to put one next to him so you can see him a little bit better. They have a really cool animation. I have to say it's really impressive. I thought that that was just amazing. And if you look down at the base, they actually have like a whole bunch of like bones and hands and bits of some kind of necromancy going on there at the bottom. It's really effective, especially with the little face animation. It's really nice. But you can have up to 3 out at a time. Of course, they will recharge like a lot of the skills in Path of Fire do. Every 15 seconds, if I cast one of these out, you'll see it'll do some damage to him when I cast it. But you'll notice that over time, this thing will start to recharge, slowly going around here over a 15-second period. Otherwise, you can have them going out in multiple spots, and you can have them all stacking up on the same character, doing lots of damage as you pulse your skills. Now, of course, that golem's going to go away, and they only last there for 20 seconds currently. If you look here, it currently has a timeline count recharge. Or there we go, duration 20 seconds. Number of targets up to 3 in their little radius. So you can stack these around in an area. You can spread them out. They're really cool, especially since they also give Torment and Cripple. And this is whenever you use a shade ability. So if I toss this out here, of course, I get the initial damage from the shade being cast. And if I use another ability, it will then pulse out a bit more of the damage. But on top of that, it also, when you use shade abilities, will pulse around where you are. So you notice I am currently being affected at the same time. Of course, this golem is also getting affected by some torment. As these guys are doing this, they're just applying the stacks on there, plus the cripple that I have going on as well. You can see 2 stacks of torment because there are two of the guys nearby here, because otherwise they would just do 1 torment. So if I have 3, let's just do this, 2 and 3 here, then I pulse this out. Every time that I pulse it, it does 3 stacks of torment. So therefore that's just really nice. Now let's go into the different shade abilities. Nefarious Favor. You and your shades convert conditions from nearby allies into boons, which is always great. Nothing wrong with having boons, unless of course you get them like blasted against you or something like that. But hey, people always like the bonuses on themselves. Number of targets 3, radius 180. So it's nice to kind of spread them out. You'll gain more benefit from that. If you're using them offensively, then typically just kind of grouping them together on an enemy would work. But if they're moving around constantly, then they might just move out of the area of effect. So that's what I was currently doing, and that does cost some of my life force, of course, just to use that. So just by casting this, I don't use the life force, but when I pulse that, you can see my life force has dropped down. So therefore, I'm reducing my ability to enter into a Desert Shroud. Now, ability number 2, or F3 in this case, Sand Cascade. Sand rises up near you and your shades to shield nearby allies, and this is a barrier skill. As you see here, barrier 2284. And if you're not familiar with barriers, barriers are sort of like in most role-playing game aspects, a temporary health pool that is added onto your existing health pool that once exhausted does not come back. And it will slowly reduce over time. So let me cast out here a shade, and then I'm going to cast Sand Cascade. And you'll see that I gain these yellow numbers here, and then they slowly start dropping over time. And what that means is that for those few seconds, I will have extra health on top of my health, which is affected first. Once that's removed, then my normal health pool gets affected at that point. So it's really nice that it can work with your group, so not just yourself. Now, if I place this guy out here, you notice that I am not in that effect, but I cast this, I still gain the benefits. Remember, use it to think of it as affecting yourself first, and a really nice secondary effect for any allies nearby. Now, if I stack these guys up together, it's not actually going to make a big difference. For if I use this ability, you'd think, all right, I use this, do I gain triple the barrier? No, you just gain the same barrier effect. So once again, stacking them together for like buffs and benefits are not going to really be that good. Stacking conditions they're good for. Doing extra damage over time if they have some kind of effect also works. But as far as distributing things to parties and groups, they don't stack so well. But let's go into the Garish Pillar. Induce fear in enemies around you and your sand shades. Now, of course, these are just target golems, so they're not going to really run away. But they will be affected by fear, and it's only for 1 second. Involuntary retreat, unable to act, stacks in duration, which works really well with increasing damage from torment skills. So keep that in mind. That is a really good offensive ability. Of course, it does cost considerably more life force than the other spells that you currently have at your, fingertips. But in this case, it's just really nice to be able to toss in a fear effect. So if you have a bunch of these guys out here, you can affect a large area with just 2 of these, cast this, and everybody gets feared. Especially the fact that you still, don't forget, affect your area as well. Though you won't see the little circle around yourself, you will still affect everything in your area too, as if you were a sand shade. Because you can also turn into a shade of sorts by turning on your Desert Shroud. Now, once you enter the Desert Shroud, you gain a powerful barrier and pulsing necrotic energy around you and your sand shade. So no longer do you get a different health pool. You now get an extra health pool on top of your existing health pool that slowly diminishes. And once that's gone, then you'll have to wait your 20 seconds before you can recast it again. Now, this is really, really good because of a few things. 1, it gives you extra hit points. Nothing wrong with that. 2, you pulse damage while you're in this. And you also are giving out Torment. You're also removing conditions in this case because of the specific build that I have chosen. It's just minimal impact, so just please try to ignore the fact that they're in blue there. Says conditions removed 1. But number of targets 3. So you can affect up to 3 hostile enemies with this as you're pulsing it. It's every 1 second and a radius of 180. So it's not too far away or anything like that. Now let's get over here and I will go into my Shroud. But first let me place down a couple of these guys. And we shall see just how good or bad this can be. So if I pulse this, everything, myself and them, are pulsing things. So if I start moving over this way, I'm going to start pulsing things as well, just from being in my Sand Shroud, which does only last about 6 seconds. So it's not overpowered by any means. But then, you know, you can always just pulse these things constantly while you're attacking and just completely destroy your your targets as you go with tons of conditions, very heavy conditions, and you can also toss out a bunch of boons at the same time. So now you understand about the torch, you understand a bit about the new shades and shrouds. Let's get into punishments and your elite skill. So punishments are your new abilities down here, which are your healing, your utility, as well as your elite skill. You've got 5 of them total, so of course you're going to have to sacrifice 1 or 2. But as far as healing skills go, you now have Sand Flare, which in this case, it grants nearby allies a barrier, and this includes yourself, of course. So don't forget, when you see this barrier, 4,500, self-heal, 3,481, you're like, okay, that self-heal is very poor. But remember, on top of that, you're gaining a 4,500 extra health boost that is stacking on top of that just goes away slowly over time. So, it also does extra effects, converting a boon on nearby enemies into Torment and Cripple. Converting boons is going to be part of the new build that I'm going to discuss shortly that you can always look into and try and benefit from. Now, in this case, you will gain Barrier, Self-Heal, Boon Conversion, Boon Conversion. There's 2 of them. You get 2 benefits on this. You'll place Torment, and you'll also put Cripple on your foe just if you remove any kind of boons that they currently have. Now, of course, these being target golems, they're not going to have any of those on them. But it's going to be very good for just general play as well as PvP. There's a lot of boon removal or conversion in the options that you'll have at your fingertips here. Now, of course, boons converted to conditions, 1, and it will give 2 conditions for that 1 boon that's converted. And this is on your target. Number of targets, 5. So anywhere within a 240 radius of you is going to be affected by this. I use this now. Boom, it pulses out. I gain all the benefits here of the nearby players that are kind of messing with this. But you saw as well that I gained a barrier, which was really, really nice. So this is a good, quick heal as well as barrier effect to prevent incoming damage. It's much more preventative than it is reactionary. So if you've already taken a whole lot of damage, this is just going to buy you a little bit of time. It's not going to heal you up as quickly as you should. So this is going to prevent the damage. If you have a big pulse coming in that you can't avoid, you do this ahead of time, and therefore you're able to take a hit for a bit from those enemies or blast a whole bunch of damage out while you're close range, whatever you like. Now, moving into some more of the punishments, as they're called, all along here. Punishment, 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 punishment. And these are not punishments on you. These are punishments on your enemies. So it's much more important to remember that. But it also, by punishing your enemies, will often give benefits to your allies. And this includes yourself. Remember, first and foremost, you are included in these allies' abilities. So, Trail of Anguish. Leave a trail of sand as you travel. Grant boons to allies passing through it, which means yourself as well. Inflict burning on enemies and corrupt a boon into cripple and torment. So it does an automatic 300 damage, which is nice. Swiftness for 6 seconds. Stability for 6 seconds. And this is wherever you're going, whatever you're doing. So for 6 seconds, every 20 seconds, you can have this running. And as you're running around, which I'm going to cast it now so you can see, you leave this little trail on the ground. So anybody else that might be in this area will gain these effects and also get their own, gain the benefits of that. Now, any enemies that are in this area are also going to be affected by Torment, as well as Cripple and Burning. So it's more just stacking of conditions with this stuff. So if I put this on here, and I just run through these guys, each one of them is going to be affected by these, as you can see. Plus, I'm gaining the ability and effects of this for 6 seconds myself while I was running. And if any of them also had any boons on them, they would be converted to further conditions, thus also stacking more conditions. It's really, as necromancers do, stack really well with conditions. So I'd recommend using something that's very condition heavy, because right now just a barbarian amulet that's just giving me a lot of health isn't really taking advantage of that ability. Now, moving into some other ones here, we have Desiccate. Draw in vital energy from your foes to gain life force and grant boons to nearby allies. Convert a boon on affected enemies into Torment and Cripple. Guess what? Torment and Cripple. There's a lot of Torment and Cripple in this, which of course always works well. Plus, it could give might to yourself, especially, and others. So once again, this is you giving out boons and giving out a bunch of conditions on nearby enemies. So you've got a radius of 300. So it's centering on you. Therefore, I'm going to run over here, be kind of between these two guys here. We'll cast this, and you'll see that it also gives you a life force benefit of 10%. This skill is going to be very key to use, let's say, every 16 seconds if you're very dependent on using your Desert Shroud abilities. So you cast this. It does take a bit of a wind up there. There's a good 1 second to do that, so you're going to want to make sure that you're not being affected by anything. You might want to start your Trail of Anguish first, and then go into Desiccate, so that you don't get interrupted by it while you've got your stability running. And therefore, every 20 seconds, you're probably going to be doing this, and you gain yourself your extra 10%. Plus, you're also keeping your swiftness and stability going. It's just a really good combination for these two together to make sure that you can keep the Desiccate up and not get interrupted while you're trying to get that out. Now, of course, it just does some really good damage, stacking of more conditions. In general, it's nice. Now let's go on to Sand Swell. This punishment allows you to plunge into the ground, creating a portal through Tyria for allied use. No longer do you have to be a mesmer in order to teleport around with portals that others can use as well. But you can grant allies using this passage a health barrier, convert a boon on nearby enemies into Torment and Cripple. So again, Torment, Cripple, you see a big pattern here with the occasional fire, or you've got, of course, your other existing abilities, which might grant like poison and bleeding and stuff. You're very condition heavy. But with this, you can also convert boons to conditions, same as before. And you've got your radius being 180 and a range of 900, but it has to be visible. So if it's not, actually let me, oh, I didn't mean to hit that guy. But if I go over here and I can't see down here by this tree, if I try using it, you see everything goes into the red. So you have to have it in a visible area, and it should have a viable route to it. Now, for example, if I choose this and I go up to the top of this rock, I may or may not be able to do so. It might tell me that it's not valid. Yeah, no valid path to target, though I can still just run up on top of this rock without a problem. Other areas, it might look like you've got a path, or you think, where in the heck do I have a path for this? This doesn't really make sense, like down here. But then if I go down a little further, it also will therefore allow me to teleport down without a problem. And then I can use the portal to get back. And of course, I gain myself a little bit of might, and I can use the portal again. It lasts for, like I said, 6 seconds, and there is a valid path to it. I mean, I did have to kind of run around like this to get up here. But it's really, really cool, especially for an escape tactic or a jump in and attack, a burst attack by your group on a target. It could be really nice. It does a bit of damage on a target on hitting there, so then you can also just teleport back to where you were too. You can jump in, drop a bunch of damage, jump out, and try and escape. So it's good for quick attack tactics, and then retreat as well. It's very, very nice. I like that one quite a bit. It does take 3/4 of a second to use, but it's still not too bad. All right, now the last punishment before we get to the elite skills is actually Serpent Siphon. This one here is quite interesting. Unleash ghostly serpents toward foes in the targeted area. Serpents striking their targets become magical sand, which grants allies a barrier. Convert a boon from struck enemies into Torment and Cripple. As before, all the punishments will convert a boon from struck enemies into Torment and Cripple. But this one also grants another effect of poison and an ally effect of barrier in the area. So the radius is 360, it's unblockable as well, so this one can be very key. But it does have a half second, and it does a really good area, actually. 360 is pretty darn effective. Let me just kind of stand over here and you'll be able to see that. Range of 900. Of course, I just back up. I forgot that it's a targeted area, so I can affect all 3 of these guys at once. And it shoots out a bunch of those targets on them, tosses poison on them, and other things. It's just a nice boon stacker and conversion of more conditions. And once again, it also affects allies in the area. So if I'm a little bit closer here and I use it on these guys, you'll see that I will gain a bit of a barrier if I was in those areas. I need to pick these little charges up to do so. And then I gain those as an extra bonus. So serpents striking their targets become magical sand, which grants allies a barrier. So the magical sand kind of sits on the ground. So if the characters that are in question or allies are nearby, are attacking it, they will gain a small barrier, especially if they're melee characters, which can be very key if you're going with something like a dagger instead, which means you then have to be up close. So you could, drop this down, attack your targets, and while you're attacking them, you can still pick up your, your extra barrier if you're going to get hit or something like that while it's sitting on the ground there. And for our last skill, the elite skill, Ghastly Breach. Breach into the realm of torment for a brief time, granting might to allies and slowing enemies. Convert a boon on enemies into torment and cripple each pulse, as before. But this is each pulse. So it actually pulses 5 times because it lasts for, 6 seconds here? 5 seconds? And it does damage per pulse as well. Boon conversion per pulse. Might per pulse. Slow per pulse. And it's just really good. Plus it's a combo field, dark. So it's just really nice. Really, really nice. Radius of 300, so if I drop this down, you can see it just hits them all for a bunch of damage. Tosses on some conditions on these guys as well. Stacks really well with everything else. It's just a nice all-out pulsing area effect that is really good. Now let's get into a bit of the build here, shall we? Now I'm not going to be recommending any specific build because I am by far and no means a Necromancer main, but I can at least go over these briefly and show you some of the benefits that you can do, perhaps give a few ideas on how you can best, kind of stack these together. Now, Mantle of Sand. Gain the power to craft sand shadows and command them using your life force. Gain access to punishment and shade skills. Those we've all covered everything down here, but we jump into here, Abrasive Grit. Granting an ally a barrier removes conditions affecting them and grants might. So once again, anything that will grant barriers will also grant might and remove conditions. So you can be a very high supportive character with this, especially since your shades can toss out some barriers. You can put those out on the field. You have a few extra punishments that can also grant some barriers, especially ones that, like that one here that you saw, the Serpent Siphon, where they pick them up at random. So if they're in trouble, they pick that up and then they're good to go. Fell Beacon. Torch skills gain reduced recharge. So this is standard for just about any of the build sets. You get something that reduces your weapon by 20%. And in this case, gain expertise based on a percentage of condition damage. 7%. So expertise, for those that don't remember, is going to enhance the duration of your conditions. And as you are very condition-heavy characters, being Necromancers or Scourges in this case, then you're definitely going to want to take a look at that as a possibility. But it's based on your condition damage, so you're going to want to have high condition damage as it is. It complements it very nicely. Now we also have Nourishing Rot. Gain life force for every boon you remove or corrupt. This might be very, very good for someone who doesn't want to go with a high health pool so that they've got, more stored up. Someone who's constantly refreshing their life force so that they can do Desert Shroud or constantly cast their different shade abilities. It can be very good for that. Just for every time every boon you remove or corrupt, will give you 5%, which is going to give you at least like halfway to getting the first ability, your Nefarious Favor for your shade on here already. Now, the next ability you gain here is going to be Sand Sage. Gain concentration and expertise, which concentration and expertise are going to increase your boon and your condition duration. For each of your active sand shades. So every active sand shade you have out there, which is up to 3, you can actually increase that by an additional 75 on both concentration and expertise. Very good, especially if you're all about spamming those sand shades. Now, we move on here. Desert Empowerment. Manifest Sand Shades grants a barrier to allies near it. So anytime that I do this, I place one of these guys down. Let's actually choose this, and we'll do this. We grant this person here a bit of a barrier. That's how that works there. Manifest Sand Shade grants a barrier to allies near it. I can actually do that on myself here. I don't know why I didn't think about that. There we go, put it right near, and I get myself a barrier just by casting one. So once again, if you're going heavy barrier class, that could be really good as well. And of course, it will affect up to 3 allies. Radius of 180 as usual. Now, Sadistic Searing. Skills gain reduced... Punishment skills gain reduced recharge and cause your next Manifest Sandshade to inflict burning on foes near it. So it will affect all of your punishments that you just gained with this new Elite Specialization. It will reduce them, the reduce recharge by 20%, as is, somewhat standard for this stuff. Plus, your Sandshades will start doing burning. So if I toss this out and I put a Sandshade down, if my Sandshade is nearby. So there we go, I just placed one down. Casting that in there will then affect the fire on him. It's a little bit more, kind of fidgety to try and get that one to work as intended, but it will definitely reduce all the recharges of your current punishments, which can be really, really important. Now, Unending Corruption. Manifest Sandshade corrupts boons on foes near it. It's simple and straightforward. You just want boon corruption, you just, cast a Sandshade near it. Boop, there you go. It's pretty good. Just corrupting boons left and right. Therefore, also you can, increase the amount of life force that you gain by removing or corrupting boons once again. So therefore, you're just all about removing boons on the characters. And then, of course, the next one you get is Blood as Sand. Reduce incoming damage for each Sandshade you have active. 5% per Sandshade. Reduced damage incoming, flat 5%. So by putting these out, 3 of these guys out, I then gain 15% reduced damage just by having those out. It's cool. So if you're spamming shades, it's definitely the way to go. It works really nicely, but there can be some downsides to this. Either way, if you've got these out, you're going to be getting at least a 5% reduction. Sand Savant. You can summon only 1 shade at a time, and this is why. This one here will allow you to summon kind of a greater shade. Actually, it says here, this greater shade has reduced recharge. You affect more targets and influence a larger area with shade skills. And it counts as 3 shades for related traits. You notice that before, when I choose a different stat here, I have 3 shades, 0 of 3. If I choose this one, it changes down to 1. Because you can only have 1, and it's a big area that it affects. So I could affect all of these guys with this. I'm just going to affect these 2. But I toss him out, and he's much bigger, doing a bit more. So he's just more impressive. He affects more targets. His count recharge comes back up after 10 seconds instead of every 15. His radius is bigger, so he's just a greater shade. So if you want shade spam that is all based around a single shade instead of like stacking a bunch of them together, that would be a really good way to go. And of course, it reduces that recharge, so it's just going to make it so you can actually replay him out there as quickly as you want. But you can only ever have 1 at a time, so if you need to move him, you can do so. But you just then need to wait your 10 seconds instead of 15 seconds before you need to worry about your next shade coming available. Now let's go into Demonic Lore. Torment you inflict deals increased damage and causes your foes to burn. Wait, what? Torment you inflict? Torment, you say? Torment. Everything that you could possibly do on a skill here, especially if you choose, like, let's go with a Scepter in this case, which adds even another ability for Torment. The damage on that would be increased by 33%. If you go with a condition-heavy build, plus a damage increase, and you're just trying to make your foes run around, it's insane amounts of damage on this. So this one can really be good, but this trait can only inflict burning on a particular target once every 3 seconds. So it will also add in burning. Torment inflicts burning, and the damage is increased. It's a tremendous skill in itself. Let's move on. Feed from Corruption. When you remove or corrupt a boon from an enemy, gain that boon. That's sounding a bit iffy, but in a PvP situation or perhaps a raid area where you've got lots of boons being thrown around, this can really be effective, especially if you're going with like a more of a Desert Shroud build where you're currently trying to gain life force every time that you remove or corrupt one. you could potentially gain those ones. And it's for this amount. It's not for the amount that they had left on it. Instead, you'd gain Aegis for 6 seconds, Fury for 6 seconds, Might, 3 stacks of Might for 10 seconds, etc., as you can see on the list here. And that pretty much lists it out. I mean, as I said before, I am by no means a a Necromancer main, but it's always been a lot of fun to play as, and I hope you guys enjoyed. If so, please be sure to give a like, comment, subscribe, and as always, spread the mischief to others who think they'll enjoy this content too. Until next time, folks. I'll see ya.